Well, folks, this is session 3 of Understanding Culture, and this is just a introduction course for our volunteers and for our paid workers as well. But or anybody that would be involved in cross-cultural or multicultural work, these series of videos would help you. Now, I ended up last time speaking about Westerners versus non-Westerners. One of the takeaways from this is that Westerners, we tend to be of the attitude, I'll be true to myself, even if it means being disloyal to my group. Now, both of those are relative. If I'm really true to myself, it doesn't mean I won't do something for the group, but it means that, in my mind at least, there's a point that I will just not bend. I would rather be true to myself, rather, and even if it means being disloyal to my group. Now, a non-Westerner reverses those true. That they would prefer to be loyal to the group, even if it means being untrue to themselves. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to compromise their conscience, but it simply means that who they are is not the first concern. Rather, they see themselves as part of this group. This is my group. I have to go along with the group. They will have limitations also. If it's going to go too far, they would have to say, no, I cannot. I cannot go that far. But nevertheless, there's expectation they will be loyal to the group. By the way, we see these often in minorities in the Western nations. When there's an ethnic minority group, we find quite often they have a greater loyalty to their group. They feel a connection with the group, and that has a strong degree of collectivism in it. They'll be loyal to that group, even if it means being disloyal uh, or untrue to themselves. And rural towns will do that a little bit more than urban centers as well. Rural cities will feel like they have to support some of the local people, even if they don't really think they're the best man for the job. If they've known them a long time, or if they're part of the family, they just have to support him. They said, "Look, I knew this guy's mother. I knew this guy's father. I've known him all my life. I have to be loyal to him." And again, it simply means that that group loyalty takes a higher value than my own thought, my own uh, values or my own perspective. So now let's jump back in to understanding more about cultures. And what we're going to look at several continuums in this video and the next one, and help us understand what cultures are like. Now, a good way to understand them is realize that we're dealing with individuals. Individuals will vary. All we can do is say, generally speaking, this is what happens in that culture. Let me show you a little drawing I got from the Interchange Institute. I received training from them several years ago. And what it is, this is a time graph. This is a meeting. What time is the meeting going to start, and what time will the people come? And this is 9 o'clock. This is 9:30. This is 10 o'clock. And the meeting is going to start at 9:30. Now, culture A, they're going to come. This bell curve represents how the people of that culture come. You realize that the bulk of them are going to come about 5, maybe 10 minutes early. For a 9:30 meeting, they're going to get there at 9:20, 9:25. That's culture A very time conscious culture. But culture B, you see, they're going to come in a little bit later. The bulk of them is going to come about 10 to 15 minutes late, some of them considerably later. And that's culture B. They have a little more flexible idea about culture. Now, the interesting thing to understand is that some of culture A are going to come later than some of culture B. And that is an important thing to understand, that all these are going to really be a bell curve with people along that continuum, and they'll vary in individuals, families, persons. Um, Even here in Germany, Germans are known to be punctual. I mean, they punctual to the extreme degree. But still, there are some people in Germany that run late. There are not many, but there are some. And of course, Germans know them. Okay, let's talk about these different continuums. We're going to deal with three, maybe four here if we have time. First one is tight versus loose. Tight means there's one way to do things. Everything must be done this way. Whatever that doing is, whether it is close to where, or how to run a meeting, or how to have church, or really what car to buy, or how to decorate your house. There's one way to do this. And then loose means there's many different ways to do it. We're much more flexible in those things. There's many different ways to dress right. There's many different ways to decorate your house or how to live. Now, in the non-West, in the rest of the world, we see that generally speaking, those cultures are tighter than the West. However, it varies very much on country, on which country. For example, Korea is very tight. It's collectivistic and very tight. Thailand is collectivistic, but really Thailand's fairly loose. They're not so particular about how you do things. And also China. The Chinese are collectivistic, but they're sort of in the mid-range of tight and loose. So this particular continuum it varies quite a bit. When you come from America to Germany, you notice the Germans are a little tighter than Americans, but they're still not across the midline. There's still a lot of different ways to do things, but some activities and some things you do in Germany, there's sort of the German way of doing it, although Germany is definitely an individualistic culture. So it varies from place to place. Rural versus urban is also interesting. The more rural a place, that is the smaller towns that you find that tend to be tighter. If you go to a small town in America, anywhere under 30,000 people, you're going to find that almost everybody dresses alike, their houses look alike, they drive similar cars, their haircut is similar. I mean, you walk into one living room, you've walked into all of them. Very little variations of the theme. But when you go to a city, you'll find greater variations. Now, sure, there may be a lot of similarities, but not quite as many. Now, that's tight versus loose. It's good to understand that sometimes people want to know what's the right way to do things. Sometimes people think this is the right way to do church, the right way to do discipleship, the right way, whatever it is, this is the right way. And any other way is wrong. Well, we should take in doing all these things, we should take into account personality as well as culture, because all cultures still have the same run of personalities. So we need to be sensitive to how people learn and how they want to express themselves. But tight versus loose. Now, time, whether it's linear or cyclical, is another concept. We looked at it briefly, but that's linear means that time's going one way. This is the way it's going. Cyclical means it's just going around and around. Of course, Ecclesiastes says a lot about that the seasons come and go and things do stay the same. But still, in churches, from a Western perspective, there is a sense of direction. We're going this way. So we have studies, we have sermon series, we have very few holidays that we recognize, just Christmas and Easter. That's about it. And anytime a pastor is going to preach, he has his sermons all lined up. This is what I'm preaching on. And he has in his mind an expectation, this is where the church is going. In a non-West situation, you see that often they just go around and around. I worked, when we were in Singapore, I worked with the Burmese of the Myanmar Baptist, or several different Baptist groups in Myanmar to help them establish some literature. And they were very gifted writers and teachers. I was very impressed with them. But in speaking to the largest Baptist denomination there in Myanmar, they said it's going to be difficult to do this because half of our Sundays are dedicated to some Myanmar or Burmese saint, that is someone who had been martyred or had demonstrated some characteristic. And what it means is half of their Sundays they cycle around each year on the same theme, and this is the non-West way of thinking, a cyclical thing, and they keep coming around to this same theme. Sermons may be repeated and come back around again and again. And that's a very different perspective. So that is the idea, really a cultural idea, not a religious idea. It's a cultural idea. Whether our culture is moving forward with time, whether it's moving this way in culture, or whether it's just going around and around. Power distance in the West is very short. That is, we respect our leaders, but we hold them accountable. We expect them to communicate with us, and we expect them to to have a social contract between them and us. That is, we give them the right to lead, but they need to come back and check in with us. But the non-West, they believe that leaders are to be revered and respected, and leaders have power that they just assume. Rights rather. We just assume that they would have. Now that means that in the non-West, titles are important. And in the West, we're a little more casual about calling people by a title. Um, I was listening to former President Trump speaking about former Vice President Pence, and he said they called him Mike Pence. Well, Mike is his name, and it's okay for the president to call him Mike, but you would not see that in another country. In an Asian country, they would never call the vice president by his first name. It would sound disrespectful. They would call him, in that situation, Vice President Pimps. They would call him like that. Um, but this is the West. It fits fine with our culture, but it's a different perspective than the non-West. I have people from cultures that, like I have a good, dear deacon in my former church. I'm a member now, but I was a pastor before. I'm retired now. Um, but he has to call me, being Panamanian, being Hispanic, Latino, he has to call me pastor. He cannot call me by my first name. He knows my first name, but he would die to call me by my first name. It's just not possible for him to say that. So he has to call me pastor. And I could meet a 13-year-old American who's going to call me David. So it's very interesting to see the different cultural takes on that. But simply, it's important to realize that people from a non-Western culture, they need to call you a term of respect. It's just important to them. Now, worship content versus context, and I'm going to stop at this one, but let me explain it. Very important. This is a very important thing to grasp. Um, the high context worship that really comes from the West. And it simply means the atmosphere of worship is very, very important. Preaching style, it can be friendly. The tone of voice is important. Hand motions are important. The preacher may even walk among the people. The music style, vigorous music with hands raised and body movement sometimes, often singing about what God means to me. The seating is done so people can see one another. The order of service, well, sometimes just as the Lord leads. We're here together, and no one's in a hurry. They'll just trust the Lord to lead as the Lord sees fit. And the length of service, same thing, as the Lord leads. Sometimes 2 hours, 3 hours, not unusual. The prayer, often with loud emotions. Sometimes I will pray at the same time. There'll just be a sense of the atmosphere, the ambiance of prayer in the room. And also there'll be decorations in the room, banners, video clips. Sometimes there'll be something more informal. Sometimes it'll be more formal, depends on the culture. But nevertheless, you feel the worship. That's the non-West. When you come into the West, however, there's going to be an emphasis on high content versus context. So, high content, the pastor may read the sermon. He may stand rigidly behind the pulpit, and the music is to be sung without or very little outward expression of emotion. Things will begin and end on time, but it'd be wrong to surmise that the high content worshiper doesn't care about or doesn't feel anything. It doesn't care about the context. But nevertheless, it is a worship that the content is more important than the context, and it's a cultural expression of the church. This is a huge difference. Well, in a multicultural context, often we kind of find someplace in the middle where people will feel comfortable. And that's an important thing to do, to not try to ostracize anybody, but try to make it something that everybody can identify with. So these are some of the cultural values, cultural continuums that helps to understand. And we'll look at the next ones in the next video. Thank you.